Howdy folks, Shad Peters here. So over the last handful of years since I started making lap steels with benders, I've had countless people email me and ask if I sell just the benders on their own. I've had so much demand for them that I have decided to make some that are milled completely out of aluminum so that the average person who wants to put one of my bending mechanisms on their lap steel or guitar is able to do so. So here we've got some of the basic tools that you will or might need. You're going to need some kind of drill, either a hand drill like this, or more ideally you would want to use a drill press. You're either going to need some center punches like this, or what is really ideal for installing these is these blind hole spotter center punches. And you can get these, a set of them in 1/8 inch from McMaster for I think it's like $5 or something plus shipping. It'll make the installation job way easier. You're also going to need an Allen key in the 9/64 inch size. You're going to need a couple of different drill bits. You'll need one that is 7/32. You'll need a 5/64 inch drill bit. You should have some number 6 screws that came with your bender, 2 brass threaded inserts that come with the bender, and you're also going to want a hammer. You should have a few 8x32 machine screws. Those are the basic tools that you're going to need. And so now we'll get down to what it actually looks like to install one of these. Obviously before I started on any of this, it goes without saying, if you don't feel comfortable doing this job, you should take it to a luthier who's competent and knows how to do installations like this. I'm not going to be held responsible for anything you might do that messes up your instrument, but if you have some decent DIY skills, you should be able to do this in your garage or in your little home shop, whatever you have, without too much trouble. The first thing you are going to want to do is get some locations marked out on your instrument. I am always putting these benders on the 2nd and 3rd string. I use a straight stop tail type of bridge here, and so I know for these instruments that if I line the bass up with the 1st and the 4th string, that my benders are going to line up just fine with the 2nd and 3rd string. You may find when you are installing your own that you need to actually measure all of this out, and what you need to wind up with is, as near as possible, the center of this bender and this bender. If you were to draw a center line through there, it should line up exactly with your 2nd and 3rd string, depending on what tuning you have it in. In an ideal world, you would use these little blind spot centers. So I'm going to put all of these into the mounting holes. Now what's super nice here is that, like I said, I know that I need to line up basically with the 1st and 4th string, and that's going to get me almost perfectly centered. So I'm going to butt right up to there. For my instruments, I like to bring it back about 1/4 inch or so. And now all I have to do is just press down on all 4 corners. I pull that up, and it might be hard to see, but I've got 4 perfect little pinpoints that are exactly going to line up with where this needs to be mounted. Now, if you don't want to spend the $5 or whatever to get a set of these blind centers, if you have a set of center punches like this, you can grab your 1/8 inch center punch and you can go around, get it lined up. You would probably want to draw a line along the side here that you can make sure you're staying aligned with, and then you could go through, grab your hammer, give it a little tap on each one of these holes. You can go through and mark them with a pencil as well. That can be a little bit tricky because each time you tap that, it's going to want to move a tiny bit on you. So sometimes it's best to do the first hole, put a screw in it, drill the next hole, put a screw in it, and as you work your way around, that will kind of eliminate the possibility of it moving as you're marking holes. If you try to do all 4 of them at once, you're almost for sure going to get a little bit of movement in there and it won't line up just right for you. Once you have all 4 centers spotted, you're going to want to drill them out with a 5/64 inch bit. Now, the ideal way to do this is in a drill press, obviously. But if all you have is a handy handheld drill, you can still do it, but you need to be extremely careful about making sure that you are totally straight vertically in both axes, both this way and this way. If you get off, then what you're going to wind up with is screws that are going down in at weird angles, and they just won't seat nearly as nicely into your bender. You're not going to have as nice of a finished product, and they're also going to want to move the bender around a little bit as you're tightening it down. If you have it at an angle, as you tighten the screw down, it's going to push the bender at whatever angle that hole is at. So you want them to be nice and straight in both axes. Again, if you have a drill press or you know somebody that does, that is the way that you want to drill these out. So I'm going to go ahead and drill these on my drill press, and I'll be back in a minute to show you what to do next. Okay, so now you've got your holes drilled. What you're going to want to do is preliminarily install the bender onto the instrument. One thing that I did forget to mention earlier that you're going to need is either a handheld or a powered screwdriver. You're going to want a number 1 Phillips head bit for the screws that come with your bender. So once I've got them all started, I'll bring them down 95% of the way with a handheld, but I don't typically snug them up with a hand drill like that. I'll come back with just a plain old screwdriver and snug these up. You may notice that the bender that I'm installing here has wooden bases on it. If you are buying just the bender from me, this will all be aluminum. The next step is we need to locate the inserts that are going to go in here, and these are for the machine screws that act as the stop for the bender. You're going to need a center punch for this job. 30 seconds, that fits right down in there. What I am going to do is mark a midpoint right here with just a plain mechanical pencil. That lead will wipe right off when I'm done with this. And that's going to give me a reference point for getting both of these holes lined up as closely as possible. So I'm going to get lined up with my first hole. I'm going to line up my second hole, give it a little tap. Okay, now I'm going to go back to the drill press. I'm going to drill these 2 holes out with my 7/32 inch bit. Now, you're going to have a 1-inch machine screw shipped with this. That's what's going to go down into that hole. And so there's no need to go any deeper than probably 3/4 of an inch to an inch. That'll just give you, plenty of excess room. So take a piece of tape, mark your depth on your drill bit, and that way you don't have any risk of going way too deep. You really don't want to do that. So I'm going to drill these out, and then I'll be back to show you what to do next. Okay, I've got my 2 holes drilled now. What you're going to want to do next is take your brass inserts. Now, I don't know how well you'll be able to see this, but these brass inserts have a small slot going up the side. What you're going to want to do is take your 832 machine screw and thread it in just past that notch. Now, the reason that these are slotted is because as you thread the machine screw into this insert, it actually opens up. That serves 2 functions. One, it keeps the insert really firmly seated in the hole. It also makes for a really tight fit on these machine screws, which for intonation is what we want. But if you thread it all the way down this insert and then try to shove it into the hole, it is not going to want to go in because it's going to be opened up all the way. And you don't want to just pound on the insert by itself because it's brass and you'll end up damaging it. You'll damage the threads, and they're so small it's hard to hold on to. So what I recommend doing is taking the extra machine screw that's included with your bender, threading it on just like a 1/16 of an inch or so. Take a hammer, and then we're going to line it up in the hole and just gently tap it down in there. I'm going to keep an eye on it, and once the top of this insert is flush with the body, I'm going to stop. Okay, see, and that is a really nice tight fit now. I cannot move that with just my fingers. I have to use an Allen key, and that's what you want. It's going to stay intonated really well that way. You're not going to have problems with it. You don't want those to be finger loose. They need to be tight. Same thing with the next one. All right, now, every once in a while, when you're seating these in, it might not seat 100% straight. It might be, you know, cocked ever so slightly one way or the other. And that's really not a big deal. What you can do is take that extra screw, thread it all the way down into the insert, and then take your hammer and just give it a little tap in whatever direction it needs, and that'll correct for it. Usually, if it has a lean like that, it's gonna be parallel with the slot. It's not gonna lean the other way. This one looks like it might be a tiny bit off. So what I'm gonna do is just thread this down in the rest of the way, and you're gonna notice that this is a pretty tight fit. You're gonna hear it squealing a little bit. Now that I've got it down in there a little, I'll take my hammer, just give it a few little taps. Looks pretty much square now. I haven't checked the other one. It might need the same thing. It's no big deal. I'm going to take that back out. Now it's pretty much ready for final assembly. I'm going to take my bender, line it back up with my original holes, and I'm going to go through that same process again, getting each screw started about 95% of the way down with a hand drill, and then I'm going to finish it up with just a plain old-fashioned screwdriver. Okay, so I'm going to take my machine screws, I'm going to go ahead and thread them all the way down on here. Okay, so these act as your depth stops. Once you have it strung up, you'll be able to dial that in. That'll get you to whatever pitch shift you want just by raising and lowering that machine screw. At this point, you would want to go back through and reinstall your bender arms. But once you've got the bender arms on it, you can pretty much string it up, start fine tuning the machine screws to get your pitch dialed in exactly how you want it. And you're pretty much ready to roll with your new Peters bender on your instrument.